Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Dawson, welcome to the podcast. Welcome back.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Guy.
I was obviously we were just speaking off air, but you were actually the first guest I published on my new podcast when I transitioned last year, and I was only looking back the other day, and it's been over a year and a half. And the fact that your book hadn't come out at that point, and we had a wonderful conversation. I re-listened to it the other day as well, and the things we covered were phenomenal. But your book, Mind to Matter, absolutely loved it, mate. So I was like, I have to get Dawson to come back on and chat about this today because it's brilliant.
It's wonderful to have these tools as well that the book describes, and the science that is in the book is progressing. But even that snapshot of where it was a year ago is just one of the most inspiring collections of scientific facts I can imagine. So I've been just living it myself daily for the last year. And just the synchronicities have been happening. It's been unfolding in a magnificent way. So,
well, it deserves all the accolades it gets, and I mean that. It's you've captured something that I think is really difficult to grasp on many levels if we're not used to reading about this or looking at this work, or it's not part of our lives. And for me, if you can break the walls down.
I was just staggered when I began to get into this because I thought I'd find some evidence that our minds create matter, the thoughts create things. But Guy, I was just blown away as I was going through the book chapter by chapter by chapter. Just one example, the chapter on synchronicity. I thought that synchronicity was just one of those interesting observable facts, and that chapter would be very short. I talk about Carl Jung and his idea about synchronicity. I'd have a few anecdotes, and that would be it. Now it's the longest chapter in the book. It's packed with science, and it turns out that there is a solid scientific basis for things like precognition and synchronicity. So I've just been blown away by seeing how much science there is around this, and then you apply it in your life, and you have all kinds of evidence that it works for you personally as well as scientifically.
Totally. And I'm going to go off on a sidetrack because you sparked a question straight away. Because if you're researching this, and there's often talk about how our mind affects reality. But for me, it's been over the years, but as I delve into it more, it becomes more and more prominent. And I think about these things at a deeper level, where it used to be just like a nice thing to think about, but never really embody it and live that way. From your research, how much do you think our mind actually affects our reality long term?
Well, in Mind to Matter, I cover that question from several perspectives. And so one way in which mind affects matter, mind creates matter, is really simple and very uncontroversial. No one disputes it, which is that our minds create our bodies very substantially every day. Just for example, in one of the studies in Mind to Matter, it talks about EFT tapping and gene expression. And EFT tapping uses tapping on acupuncture points like this, and it affects mood. And so what we find when we tap is that genes are turned on. Genes to do with longevity, genes to do with cell repair, genes to do with cancer tumor suppression, genes to do with cell metabolism, genes to do with cell communication. And so there's no real controversy there. I know if I'm stressed, if I'm in a mental state of stress, my body will make more adrenaline, more cortisol, more stress hormones, and will make fewer healing hormones like DHEA. If I turn the process around, there are several studies showing that people who are stressed and then use EFT acupressure, they then have a massive reduction in cortisol. In one study I published in the medical journal recently, in 1 week of meditation and tapping, people's baseline of that stress hormone cortisol dropped by 37%. So I'm literally creating molecules like that in my body. I'm also creating molecules like immunoglobulins. In other research, it shows that genes are dialed up, which affect the immune system. And so these immunoglobulins, which are in my mucous membranes, my saliva, my eyes, and that protect my body from viruses and bacteria and pathogens, those immunoglobulins are turned way up. That same study that showed cortisol dropped 37% showed that people's immunoglobulins rose by 113% in just a week. So in that way, we are creating our bodies literally with our minds. But the really cool part is in the second part of the book, where I'm getting into more controversial territory and harder to prove, not nearly as many experiments. I mean, there are thousands of experiments showing that our minds affect the matter of our bodies. But there are maybe a couple hundred showing that our minds are literally shifting the world outside of ourselves, are shifting molecules, are shifting electromagnetic fields, might be shifting gravity, are certainly shifting the nuclear forces, the strong and weak nuclear forces. So that's just amazing stuff. And this has been known for, it's been 200 years since the first double slit experiment showing the observer effect, that observing a particle makes it change its behavior. So yeah, there's plenty of evidence there that our minds are, our brains really act like transceivers. We're living in these information fields, and our brains are receiving signals from those fields, much like the way the device that you're watching this on now is receiving your podcast, so that people are seeing the podcast, might be holding their iPad in front of them watching it, but that doesn't mean that you, Guy, and me are inside the iPhone, the iPad, the monitor. We're somewhere else, we're another time, another place, and that iPad is just the transducer, the receiver of that signal. In the same way, our brains are receiving signals from these information fields outside of ourselves and then transducing them into what we think of as material reality.
It's incredible. There's two questions that spring to mind. And one is, how would you then define the mind in the first place? And the second one, actually, go with that one.
Yeah, and there's a lot of controversy about this in the field of consciousness research. What exactly is the mind? And so what the materialist view is that consciousness is thrown up by a complex brain, and that mind is what brain does. So we have these brains, and they do things called thinking. That thinking is the mind, and the totality of that is consciousness. But what we're now seeing is a much more interesting model, where mind, our local mind, is in fact a subset of non-local mind. And non-local mind is nature, non-local mind is the universe, non-local mind is what Teilhard de Chardin called the psychosphere, which is the sum total of all consciousness on the whole planet. So we exist, just as we exist in an atmosphere, where we exist in a psychosphere, and ideas spread. And there's this phenomenon called emotional contagion in chapter 2 of the book, how it shows how if I am happy, I make my next door neighbor about 34% more happy. And he makes his next door neighbor, who I don't even know, about 14% more happy. And she makes her next door neighbor, who I'm 2 degrees of separation removed from, about 9% more happy. So we're producing emotional contagion in the world all around us. As we change their emotions and they become more happy, their cortisol drops too. So in these ways, I'm producing these big effects in the world around me. So consciousness is a field. And we have a local consciousness. So I can tell you my name is Dawson Church, that I'm a science writer, that I'm wearing a blue shirt today, that I'm going away to New York tomorrow, and these are all parts of my local consciousness and local mind. But in meditation, when I close my eyes and I reach these elevated states that the mystics describe as being ecstasy, then I lose my anchoring in local mind and thinking I'm me, and I gain an awareness and a union, the beautiful state of union that these mystics describe, losing themselves, becoming one with non-local mind. That's where bliss is to be found. So that's the kind of mind you want to have. You want to inhabit local mind. You want to remember to wear a shirt before the interview rather than showing up stark naked. Or you want to make sure you balance your bank account and don't spend more than you earn. I mean, you need this local mind, and local consciousness comes in really handy for driving a car to the grocery store. But when it comes to the actual essence of our being and realizing our full potential and having a grand vision for our lives, we're going to lose local mind, lose ourselves in non-local mind. And certainly when we think of ourselves and love ourselves and get into compassion, do it at that non-local level, and then turn our brains into transceivers of that signal, and then live that kind of life in our local reality.
Yeah, incredible. And it's really interesting, like you mentioned about what the mystics have been talking about as well. Had you found much study around mystical experiences? Because what you said then I can relate to on a very deep level now, because I've had that experience where I've stepped away from my busy life and been able to turn myself inward and have this connection of union to something greater that's beyond yourself. And when you have an experience like that and you bring it back to daily life, life becomes really different.
In fact, even having an experience one time, Guy, can leave permanent imprints on the brain.
Oh.
A study of people doing just 12 minutes of meditation for 8 weeks, very little amount of time, showed changes in their brains. And what happens when you have those deep states is that the parietal lobe, which is responsible for locating your body in space. So because I have a parietal lobe and it functions, I can tell where my finger ends and the water bottle begins. In people with a damaged parietal lobe, they reach out for the water bottle and they knock it over because they don't have this ability to have good spatial perception. But in these elevated states, the parietal lobe drops in functioning dramatically, and you lose track of where you end and the universe begins. So now you feel one with everything. You have surges of these hormones. In the book, I talk about the bonding hormone, oxytocin. In Mind to Matter, I also talk about the neurochemical of bliss, anandamide, which floods your synapses in your brain. Now you feel one with everything, you feel bonded with everything, and you're in bliss brain. So those are elevated states, and they change the brain. In one study, I talk about a meta-analysis in chapter 1 of Mind to Matter, but then I illustrate the science always in the book with stories. And the story I tell in chapter 1 is of an astrophysicist who was also a TV reporter called Graham Phillips. And he'd heard about meditation. He wasn't a meditator, but he'd heard it did good things for you. So he thought he'd go on an 8-week meditation mindfulness course. But before he did, he went into Monash University and got a comprehensive series of brain scans, followed with a TV crew. So there's a TV crew filming him over the whole course of the 8 weeks, including all the scans, all the tests at Monash University. And then he went on his meditation and mindfulness journey for the next while. And within 2 weeks, his behavior changed. He was much less stressed, much more tolerant, much more compassionate. After 8 weeks, he went back to Monash. They used a high-resolution MRI to measure his brain. And the scientists who measured his brain were absolutely astounded because one region of the brain grew in that 8 weeks by 22.8% in just 2 months. And it was the part of his brain that governs emotional regulation. It's in the very center of the brain. It's part of the hippocampus, and it has tentacles that reach out to other brain regions and regulate emotions across brain regions. And in just 2 months, his dentate gyrus, that little region of the brain, grew by 22.8%. That's how quickly the stuff of mind is triggering the hardware of brain. And we are shifting our brains, the actual neuron firing in our brains and the actual structure of our brains really rapidly when we start to do this. So that profound experience you had, Guy, that's going to start literally changing, remodeling the hardware of your brain.
It's amazing. And, you know, you'll definitely be able to explain it better than myself. And I think about this often, but it was like I didn't have the circuitry to understand what true joy felt or true love from the way I'd lived my entire life. And by having this experience, it's like when you spoke about that growth and that adaptation, it's like there's, I don't know, new circuitry sprouting and growing in there that's allowing that feeling, that frequency, that communication to then start to run easier, almost like going to the gym where you just train and these muscles are expanding and adapting to it. Would you say that's
exactly like I go to the gym? And that's neuroplasticity. By using a muscle, you make it bigger. By using a neural circuit, by firing a neural circuit, it begins to wire together. Not only that, but initially it takes a lot of control to meditate. So you have to really focus. You have your prefrontal cortex heavily engaged. there's also a part of the prefrontal cortex called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is the most central part of the brain when it comes to decision making. It also then has another tendril running from there to the memory and learning centers in the middle of the brain, the hippocampus, called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. So you're really exercising and working these new brain regions, but do it long enough, and then attentional control becomes automatic. Now that ability to slip into meditation is controlled by parts of the brain much lower down called the basal ganglia. Now it's become routine. So just the way somebody who swings a baseball bat or kicks a soccer ball or plays another sport develops that ability to hit the ball time after time after time because it's in the basal ganglia, they can do it unconsciously. The experienced meditator does the same thing. And in the book, I give you 30 different techniques in Mind to Matter of things you can use in your life. But meditation is the foundation of it all. And it starts to then change your brain, and then it shifts to being an effort using the prefrontal cortex to being automatic as it sinks in to those basal ganglia.
Incredible. That makes so much sense. And I wanted to mention, I got it on my notes here, because I was fascinated by some of the experiments. And you talked about a DNA experiment where there was intenders influencing the DNA. Can you share that with us? Because that blew my mind.
That is an absolutely stunning experiment. And the question I was trying to answer in that part of the book, so I show pretty clearly in the first few chapters that mind creates matter, mind creates molecules inside of ourselves, mind creates molecules outside of ourselves. But how do you explain the difference between a person who is a good manifester, who has an intention, and what this person intends just comes true, and a person who has great intentions, wants things to happen, and none of it comes true? I knew a woman like this, and I really liked her. She was a close friend of mine at one point, and she'd have these fantastic intentions. She was articulate. She was very well able to describe them. She had clear intentions, but none of them ever actually materialized. She'd always have an inspiring talk, and then no action would follow. Whereas I know other people who, when they say, I have this intention, it's going to happen. What is the difference between those people?
Yeah.
So I want to give you a useful guide in my book, Mind to Matter, between the difference between the two, and also how you can become one of those master manifestors and not be one of the people like my friend Gillian, who nothing much would happen when she would intend to have things happen. So how do you get to be a master manifestor? And the answer has to do with brain waves. When we hook people who are master manifestors up to EEGs and read their brain waves, they have highly coherent brains, whereas people like Gillian, who aren't, have all of those same intentions, but they have really incoherent brain waves. So in that experiment with the DNA, they had people get into the state of deep heart-brain coherence. You can do this. I have the instructions for doing this in the book Mind to Matter, and also on the website mindtomatter.com. I show you exactly how to get there, and it's all free on the website. So go to the website, do this experiment, get into deep coherence before you intend. And they were told to intend that the DNA in a flask of DNA twist tighter. And you can take the double helix molecule, and sometimes it's twisted tighter, sometimes it's less twisted, and scientists can measure the degree of twist in the molecule using advanced equipment. So they told these people to have the intention that the molecules of DNA in that solution twist tighter. Now, Guy, when the intender sat there, held the intention and said, I want this to happen, and then the scientists tested the DNA a second time, they found that the intention alone produced no effect. But when those same people entered the state of deep heart-brain coherence and then had the intention of the DNA twisting tighter, the DNA did twist tighter. So then the scientists said, okay, let's try this. Let's make this a little bit harder. Here are 3 flasks of DNA. Number 1 in the middle, 2 and 3 on the side. We want you to twist the DNA tighter in the middle flask, but not in the 2 on either side. And sure enough, the same thing happened. When those people went into deep heart coherence, held the intention that only the middle flask will change, that's exactly what happened. the scientist said, okay, well, maybe it's just due to some kind of weird anomaly that's twisting these molecules tidal. Now I want you to untwist the molecules, but only in the flask on the left and not on the one on the right or the middle. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. They then said, okay, now to make this harder still, we're going to move all 3 flasks into a room at the other end of the building so you can't even see them. Because maybe it's something about your personal electromagnetic field is influencing those flasks. We want to move the flasks way, way, way away from you. We want you to shift the DNA only in the left-hand flask at a distance. And again, in heart coherence, that's exactly what happened. And then the final experiment was that they moved all 3 flasks 50 miles away. That's 80 kilometers away. Now the different room, the meditators had no idea where they were, but in that heart coherent state, they could literally shift the DNA and only in the target file. That is the power you and I have to change material substances that are distant from ourselves and are outside of our own bodies. So we have superpowers. We just aren't using them most of the time.
We've never been taught. It's phenomenal. And I got to add, I'm not sure if you know, Dawson, but I run a community membership here, and it's been growing fantastically. But through the work of Lynn McTaggart as well and the Power of 8, we've actually been doing group intentions over Zoom. So everyone's in their own home and sending an intention to one person that needs some support in a certain area of their life. And we must have held 30 at least now over the last 12 months. And it's been staggering, some of the reports back coming from it. And it's so great to have science actually showing, supporting what's going on, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
What do you think, because we've always worked in a world where we're using matter to affect matter when it comes to the bodies. How much or how big a role do you think is actually playing from your research about affecting the energy to affect the matter of the body, just like what we were doing then in the DNA, which is pretty much energy to matter?
Yeah. Well, if you look at our medical establishment, you see that people go to the doctor, go to the hospital, go to the clinic, and the first thing they usually do is mechanical and material. They aren't focused on energy, and they give very little thought to their energy, how their energy might be creating their disease, and how their energy can be uncreating their disease. So I'm really recommending in Mind to Matter, I'm really strongly recommending that you always go to matter second and energy first. So look at how you can change your energy, shift your energy, and how it can change your life. I'll give you an example of a case that just gives me chills whenever I think about my friend Beth, who's just come up with a book about her experiences. But Beth was diagnosed with metastasized breast cancer, which is not a good diagnosis. They found a 5-centimeter tumor in her right breast, solid tumor, and they found that all of the lymph nodes underneath her right armpit were swollen and inflamed, which indicated the likelihood of cancer cells having now escaped from the tumor, taken up residence in her lymph system, and once it's in your lymph nodes, it can spread all the way through your body. They also found 3 spots of inflammation on Beth's right lung. In fact, the diagnosis was so serious that the oncologist at this big hospital cancer center where she was being treated said, Beth, the day that she got the diagnosis, the oncologist said to her, Beth, normally we'd schedule you for chemotherapy and radiation, but this is so serious. I want you to go straight from my office today to the radiology department and get your first radiation treatment right now. Now, faced with this life-threatening diagnosis, Beth said something and did something very courageous. She said, I need time to think. I need to go home, talk to my husband, talk to my friends, make some phone calls, send out some emails, and really look at my options. And she did. She emailed me, emailed other friends in medicine or psychology, and we made recommendations to her. Like in one of her later emails, she said, Dawson, I've had this gene test, and it shows I have 8 defective genes, some of which predispose me to breast cancer. So I said to her, Beth, You may have 8 defective genes, but you have 24,000 genes in your body. That means that 23,992 are just perfect. Let's work with those. And so she focused on the positive. She changed her energy. She did Qigong. We did energy healing with her remotely and in person. She cleaned up her diet. She got rid of all the stress in her life. She turned off the alerts on her cell phone. She focused on her positive mental framing every day. And she got the diagnosis in March of 2017. In 2017, in May, same year in May, she went back to the cancer clinic and they found that all the lymph nodes under her right armpit were clear, were normal. No signs of cancer there anymore. And the tumor had shrunk from 5 centimeters to 1.4 centimeters in just 2 months using energy. So again, how many people would have taken the oncologist's advice, gone the material route, gone straight from the office, straight to radiotherapy, and then had those radiation treatments, got chemotherapy, focused on matter? Beth focused on energy, and that is the focus we need to bring to our relationships, to our money, to our careers, to our spiritual lives, to our health. It's all about energy. Change your energy and your life can change. So we live in a materialist world. We tend to seek material solutions first, but I really challenge people in Mind to Matter. Look and see what energy can do for your life, for your health, for your money, for your well-being, for your stress levels. It can give you a dramatically better life than the life you enjoy today.
Amazing. That's amazing. Do you think this adaptation is going to become more mainstream over time?
I'm seeing a lot more mainstream people in my trainings. 15 years ago, we found alternative medicine practitioners, chiropractors, body workers in the trainings. Today, we see psychiatrists, we see nurses, we see psychologists, we see a lot of medical professionals. So it's becoming much more mainstream. Also, in my nonprofit, we worked for about 10 years to get EFT accepted by the U.S. Veterans Administration. But after 10 years of basically banging my head against the wall and trying, eventually it was declared to be a safe therapy and approved for use with veterans. So yeah, it's moving its way into mainstream. I asked one psychologist who was using EFT in the VA hospital in Washington, D.C., and I said, when did you begin using EFT in the VA hospital there with veterans? And he said, the day after you got it approved, Dawson. So now these therapies, I mean, these therapies are so good. They change enzymes, they change hormones, they change genes. It's not like we can just afford to ignore them. It would be like, having penicillin and saying, well, we're just not going to use that, or having an antidote to a disease and saying, well, we'll just leave the pills in the bottle. I mean, we have these therapies today that are just crushing it when it comes to stress, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And when you solve those mental problems, when you solve those spiritual problems, when you teach people to meditate and tap and use these wonderful energy therapies, things like cancer just go away. I know there was one, I was reading a medical journal last week about 2 case studies of people getting Reiki before cancer surgery. And the Reiki, the tumors were measured. Then the Reiki masters did the Reiki on the patients, 1 session, and the tumor shrank by a half on average in that 1 session. If we have this miracle ability to do this with our hands, with our energy, with our consciousness, how can it not become not just a medical alternative? This is medicine itself, the ability to shift our energy and to shift matter.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I've got to ask you as well, and I'm thinking of the listeners as well. And you're learning all this, you're hearing all this, and you're like, oh my God, how amazing are we? And then of course we walk out and we continue to do the same things.
I know.
Right? We're constantly up against ourselves, constantly. Like, I think the biggest battle is with myself more than anyone else. You know what I mean? In any changes I want to make in life. And I often think about that. But I'm wondering what you do. Let's say you wanted to think about setting an intention for the future? Or how would you turn that into a practice? Or what would you do? Like, what would you advise someone else listening to this?
The first thing I would advise is that you set your intentions from a place that is not your local mind. Now, this is totally contrary to the advice most people give. Like, I teach a 7-day life vision retreat every year over just after Christmas, over New Year's. People come to a retreat center, they spend 3 days really letting go. On New Year's Eve, we do a labyrinth walk, and then they download their intentions over the next three days for the new year, but not from local mind, because your local mind is obsessed with your local self. It's worried about what you don't have. It's trying to preserve what you do have. It has desires born out of your conditioning, and it's really not usually a very good place to create out of. You can create out of it if you want, but what I say to people at the Life Vision Retreat and elsewhere is I say, tune in to the universe. The vision the universe has for you and your life is infinitely greater than any goal setting you could do for yourself locally. So surrender your local mind, move into bliss brain, move into a union with non-local mind, and then create from there. Now, when you're channeling the vision of your future from non-local reality, it's able to make connections. It's able to work synchronicities. It's precognitive. It's telepathic. It has all these abilities, all these gifts that you don't have when you're stuck at the level of local mind. But that's where we are most of the time. So we have to practice getting unstuck over and over and over again. Do it often enough, though, and you build up the ability, and you can then merge with non-local mind much easier. And then you do all of your creating, all of your visioning from non-local mind. So when I have a very difficult problem, like right now I have two difficult problems. I have a problem in the book I'm writing. I have to decide how to end the book, and it's really tough between two alternative endings. The other thing I have is I have one situation with a website I have responsibility for, and we've been struggling to update the site, and it hasn't been going well. So I said to myself, for both things, just merge with non-local mind. Just go out there and ask the universe. And in both cases, I got inspired, brilliant, out-of-the-box ideas out there that I never would have gotten from the best efforts of my local mind. Albert Einstein said that virtually every scientific discovery is the result of intuition. If you ask great Nobel Prize winners, great scientists, great artists, you'll find what they do is they get out of their own way. They move into oneness with the universe. And this universe, guy, is full of love for us. It's full of compassion for us. It's full of creativity that floods through us. In this state, the business consulting firm of McKinsey did a 10-year study of high-performing executives and found when they move into these elevated states, their ability to solve problems increases by about 500%. Another study found that problem-solving ability increases by 490%, a 5-fold increase in creativity, problem-solving ability, and productivity. Now, you can solve all kinds of problems with 5 times the firepower that you have right now, and that's where you want to be creating your visions and your life purpose from.
Yeah, got it. They say your best answers come in the shower, don't they? When you're
when you aren't thinking about them at all.
And they land, and the key is just to act upon them, right? Once they come, you know? Yeah, amazing, Dawson, amazing. Now, I've got a set of questions I ask everyone on the show. And the first one is, what's been a low point in your life that has later turned out to be a blessing?
Well, the lowest point of my life for the last recent period is that Mind to Matter was published, and I finished published in June of 2018. I finished the manuscript in September of 2017. On October 9th, 2017, I was awakened by my wife in the middle of the night. I looked at my alarm clock and said 12:47 a.m. And it's like, why is she waking me up at 12:47 a.m.? I looked out the window and there was a glow on the horizon. I got out of bed, the lights went out, all the power went out. I walked outside, And there was a wildfire moving over the hill toward our estate. And I just yelled to her, "We're getting out of here right now." We flung on our clothes, we grabbed our laptops and cell phones, and we sprinted for our car, which was at the other end of we had a big property with an office building and a big storage building and beautiful home overlooking this valley. And as we jumped in the car, drove out, my wife felt heat on her head, looked up through the moonroof, and all the trees above her head were on fire. And so that night, 5,300 homes were destroyed by the wildfire. 22 people died in the fire. All the people who died in the fire, 8 of those people lived within 1,000 yards of our home. It moved so fast. It was moving the length of a football field every 3 seconds. There just wasn't time for people to get out. And so many people died in the fire, and it destroyed all these homes. So that was a cataclysm. We were very confused, dazed. We had PTSD for the first few days. I mean, we were really not doing too well, even after we escaped. But by the 3rd day, I said to my wife, we need to meditate. And as we meditated that 3rd morning, suddenly we dropped back into our bodies, and we had a real sense of our resilience, and we began to come back into ourselves and plan and start to act intelligently once again. And then, of course, we've had a couple of years of recovery from the wildfire. It brought about a financial catastrophe because all of our income stopped while our expenses were even greater than before, trying to recover. So we had these huge financial challenges. I then had a big health challenge, and we had a couple of years that could have, if we didn't have the tools in Mind to Matter. And again, in Mind to Matter, I give you 30 of these tools. But if we didn't have those tools, we would never have been able to cope. And even now, 2 years later, many people are still suffering from PTSD. So we recovered really fast. And so that was a low point, and it was difficult for us in many different ways. But thanks to those tools in Mind to Matter, we just bounced back swiftly. So that was a low point, and also showed us that the things we're talking about, meditation, tapping, time in nature, social support, grounding, earthing, all these things, they really work. And when I was giving keynote speeches just 2 weeks after the fire, one of my colleagues was saying, "I can't believe this guy showed up to give a keynote speech just less than 2 weeks after the fire. This guy stands in front of you, his living testimony to the power of these techniques." Now, I don't want anyone to have to deal with something quite that severe, but they can help you with all the issues in your life. They make you resilient.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Dawson. What does your morning routine look like?
I wake up in the morning and I meditate addictively. Addictively, literally, because anandamide, I mentioned anandamide earlier, anandamide is the bliss molecule. Ananda is the Sanskrit word for bliss. It was discovered in the mid-1990s, and it docks with certain receptor sites in your brain like a lock and a key. Now, it docks with the same receptor sites as THC. And THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. But you make your own natural THC in your brain. It's called anandamide. It's called the bliss molecule for a very good reason. So you meditate like that, and you feel wonderful. Meditation produces serotonin in your brain. Psilocybin is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. And so what happens is when you meditate in this deep way, you make lots and lots of serotonin in your brain. Now, you're high on psilocybin, you're high on THC, and it's coming from within your own synapses in your brain. So you wake up in the morning, and there's nothing you want more than to meditate. You feel addicted to these wonderful bliss-inducing chemicals, and you just meditate first thing in the morning, and you feel great. So I give you all the instructions on that meditation on mindtomatter.com, and also in the book Mind to Matter. So it's all there in the book. I do that first thing in the morning. Then after I've done some meditation, I'll start my daily routine. I'll maybe have a transition into the day after that. But meditation is the foundation of every day for me. And once you've trained yourself to do this, all of those neurochemicals of bliss get you addicted to feeling that good.
Yeah, it's a good addiction, that's for sure. If you could have dinner with anyone in the world tonight from any time frame, anywhere, anyone, who would it be, do you think, and why?
I think the great spiritual teachers like Jesus and Buddha, they they transcended their reality, and they preached a very different message 2,000 years ago from the world in which they lived. And I think that they were thousands of years ahead of their time. And so those great spiritual teachers, the great adepts of history, I'd pick one of them, because to sit with those people, and then not just to be in their wisdom, because their words, the Buddha said to us, with our minds, we create the world. Now, science is showing that's reality. Jesus talked about love and compassion in a world in which there wasn't a lot of love and compassion. There was a lot of brutality and competition and strife. And so just hearing those words, but then feeling the energy of those masters, I'd love to have dinner with and sit with a spiritual master. And the cool thing is, basically meditate, and you get to be in that state and be with them every day.
Fantastic. And is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners to ponder on from everything we've covered today?
The likelihood I find, I teach a lot of live workshops, and that schedule is also at the mindtomatter.com website. You can go take a workshop with me, with one of our trainers, with one of our practitioners. But I teach these workshops, and I find that people are living, Guy, in a tiny subset of their potential. They have this much potential, and they're living as though they had that much potential. So they moan and groan and have tragic stories about their health and their weight and their bodies and their diseases and their money and their relationships, and how they have a hard time finding love and their career and all these tragic stories. And I sympathize with every one of them, and I believe none of them, because I know, even as the person tells me that sad story, that they are a being of infinite potential. And as we meditate together, I find those stories totally change. Their happiness at that week-long retreat, where people's cortisol dropped 37% and their immunoglobulins rose by 113%. Their anxiety and depression dropped. Their happiness rose by 31%, and it stayed that way as we followed them up in the months and years later. So I know that you can be much happier than you are, much less stressed than you are, flood your brain with the neurochemicals of bliss every day, and basically transform yourself into a vibrantly happy human being. So the big message is, when you hear yourself saying, oh, this is just the truth of me, my body, my work, my weight, my career, my relationship, don't believe your own story. You are capable of far more. You can have love flooding through your life. You can have fulfillment and passion and creativity just as your daily staple. You can be productive. You can be creative. You can love your work. You can have huge amounts of creativity flowing through you. All of these are possible. And when you hear yourself make yourself small, don't believe a word of it.
Beautiful. That's such a great place to end it on. And if anyone wants to grab a copy of your book, Mind to Matter, I do have it here. Amazing. Yeah, I'm assuming, I'm in Australia. It did definitely come from somewhere. I'm not sure where, but I know it can be ordered. And where's the best place to send everyone if they want to learn more about what you do, Dawson?
If you go to mindtomatter.com, you get those 7 free meditations. You also get the first couple of chapters of the book free. Also, I'm really asking people now to leave me reviews on Amazon. My goal is to have over 1,000 5-star reviews, and people have been just sharing about the book in meditation circles, on Amazon reviews, to their friends, and I so want people to know this information and be inspired to change. Because if you can just share a review on Amazon, share a review on Facebook, share any way you know with people in your life that you love, it can so change their lives. So please do share. But all of those links are at mindtomatter.com, including the free meditations, free tapping scripts, and a link to the place you can leave that review.
Beautiful. Dawson, thank you so much for coming on today, and thank you for bringing this book out. And I was busting, like I said at the beginning, I was busting to get you back on the show to discuss a little bit more, so bring more awareness to your work, and truly grateful. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.